Paper was like gold in medieval times.
Oh, not tobacco, sugar.
That everything we thought we knew about the world might turn out to be completely wrong.
Welcome to Cedar Springs Community. It's nestled in the Niagara Escarpment in the city of Burlington, about an hour west of Toronto. Every summer, 83 families join forces to run this private piece of paradise.
These are in all the water. They're called crayfish. We like to collect them and show them off.
Cedar Springs has been around since the 1920s. It's long on history. Generations of families have been members here.
My dad came here when he was a kid, and so we bought a cottage when I was born.
It's not about the building, it's not about the cottage, it's about the community. Some people find it, they question, is this a cult or something? Because they talk to anyone who's been here, they kind of talk like it's a cult.
Tom Simpson could wax on forever about the joys of Cedar Springs, which doesn't always bring joy to his neighbors.
The community was on the front page of Weekend magazine in 1959, and the cars just came streaming through the gate. So there's a number of the community that say, hey, you know, we're here for our enjoyment, not for other people to come and gawk at us. You know, we're not interested in tourists coming through. We like the peace and quiet, and it's a very close-knit community.
They're pretty protective of their turf. After all, they're trying to keep things the way they were back in the day.
I was raised at a cottage in the 50s and 60s where Mom and the kids lived at the cottage all summer and Dad commuted up on the weekend. People don't live that way anymore. They can at Cedar Springs because Mom and Dad can live at the cottage, commute to work, come home. The kids can live here all summer.
Tom's a big fan today, but even he needed some convincing before he joined the club.
We lived out in Burlington. We were taking the GO train every day to work. And one day Bev says, I think we need a cottage. And I said, are you nuts? We commute every day, Monday to Friday. I'm not going to drive to the Muskoka on the weekend. And I remember this place from a kid. And next thing I know, 2 weeks later, we owned a cottage at Cedar Springs.
They had some interesting plans for their new cottage. Job one, make it look older.
Well, this is the screen room where we spend all of our time because we can hear the water, we can hear the birds. When we built the cottage, it had modern windows, lots of glass. We took all that out and wanted to take it back, do a reproduction of an original Cedar Springs cottage. And we found a whole set of leaded glass doors and windows, and we designed the rebuild around those. And so all the windows we had left ended up right here. This we made a big open area, so we have lots of room for entertaining parties. We've actually had dances here. This is the original fireplace built in 1926. We restored it, repointed it, and it works great now. This panorama here looks out over a pine tree that's over 100 years old. It's known as the pine tree that the founder missed. W.D. Flatt, who founded the community, was a lumber baron. He had stripped the valley of all of its lumber before he developed it. As they say, that's one he missed.
The entire Cedar Springs community started with one humble cabin.
This is the founder's cottage right here. There's a little plaque there too. But this was the style of the original cottage. The cedar logs, the straight single-story structure.
Nothing simple or straight about the history of this community. It was the brainchild of lumber tycoon W.D. Flatt. In Cedar Springs, Flatt killed 2 birds with 1 stone. He made a bundle snapping up the land and divvying it up into plots. The Sunday school teacher believed private rest and relaxation were next to godliness. the place still runs pretty much as he first envisioned it. And he wasn't alone in that vision.
Rustic is the rule. Under the legal agreement that is on every one of these properties, there's a covenant between each and every member that they will maintain a rustic cottage. The membership committee would take you through the sorts of things that the club is looking for and what you can offer to the club. And if everything goes fine, you're accepted for membership, and then you can close the deal. If you're buying a cottage because you want a permanent existence, this is not the place for you. This is a family community where you're expected to volunteer, commit your time to participate in the activities in the club.
But how much does all this commitment set you back?
It's about $3,000 a year, and that pays for the operation of the club. It's quite reasonable, actually.
Well worth it, in fact, if the rumors of eternal youth turn out to be true.
Down here is the Fountain of Youth. It's been running continuously since 1926 and was the sole source of water in the earlier cottages. We had Flat's nieces here a couple of years ago. They're in their 90s. I think one's over 100 now. They were drinking this from their youth, obviously. You know, I'm going to live forever drinking this. It's a magical place, Cedar Springs. I mean, the families, the kids, the cottages, it's all that stuff you remember growing up at a cottage in the 1950s and 60s, and it's all been preserved and protected.
Who wants to come here every summer? Me!
I'm a very lucky man. My family's a very lucky family. It's such a great place to bring my kid up. I'm thrilled.
Thrills and chills in a centuries-old mariner's lighthouse.
One evening, I was coming down the stairs and happened to glance in at a window in one of the small bedrooms, and I thought for a moment I saw a bearded man that I took to be Lighthouse Willie. I'm Lighthouse Carol, and this is my retreat.
This marks the spot of West Point on PEI's western shores, home to one of the province's proudest landmarks, West Point Lighthouse. Once, it stopped boats from crashing into the shore. Since 1984, it lets travelers crash in its remodeled rooms. The transformation of the building is a result of the labors of Lighthouse Carol.
I got the nickname Lighthouse Carol because I have been so closely associated with the West Point Lighthouse. It's really unique. Visitors come, they get the chance to stay in an actual lighthouse.
We're from California.
We heard about this place, and it's a pretty cool place to stay in.
When electricity was added to the lighthouse, the keeper left, and it stood empty for several years. But Carol's feelings for the lighthouse, combined with a need to help her community survive, inspired her to revive it.
First, we thought we would have it just as a museum, and then we realized museums don't pay for themselves. And someone said if we build the house back on, then we're going to have bedrooms. Why not have people stay there?
So, the rare privilege of bunking in a lighthouse can be yours for just $150 a night.
There are 13 rooms, one in the tower, one in the keeper's quarters, and they're more or less traditional, styled in the era of the lightkeeper's cottage, and the new ones are the contemporary ones.
For most visitors, sleeping in a lighthouse is a first-time experience. For Carol's family, the tradition dates back 138 years.
The first lightkeeper was my great-grandfather, William MacDonald, who was called Lighthouse Willie to distinguish him from the numerous other MacDonalds. He and his wife, Mariah, lived here at the lighthouse. They had 8 children, and one of their sons was my grandfather, Jack MacDonald. So I grew up hearing all the stories from the great aunts and uncles.
While the relatives talked the talk, Carol walked the walk, all the way up 4 flights. She also did the legwork in getting to know the lighthouse's inner workings.
It's a long climb to the top, but it's really worthwhile because there are displays and things to see as you go.
They don't build lighthouses anymore. And they don't build inns like lighthouses either. This dwelling is rock solid.
When we were refinishing the lighthouse, we deliberately left this corner so that people could see what's known as heavy frame construction. It's quite steep here. You'll be glad you're getting to the top. When you reach the light, this is the area that the keeper had to come to every 3 or 4 hours to make sure that everything was rotating as it should. One of the important things was to keep the windows extremely clean, both inside and out. This is the very kind of weather where the ships need the lighthouses to guide them on their way.
Then there was something Lighthouse Carol didn't expect to see.
One evening, I was coming down the stairs and happened to glance in at a window in one of the small bedrooms, and I thought for a moment I saw a bearded man that I took to be Lighthouse Willie. And I didn't say much about it because it was just a very momentary thing, and I thought people would think I was crazy. But not very long after that, one of the other directors was staying there, and when she left, she went up to the top of the tower, checked that all was well, and got in her car and went to leave, and she noticed a light on in that same bedroom where I had seen. Anyway, she turned off the light, went to leave again, and the light was on. So she told us later, I decided if there was somebody in there that wanted that light on that bed, they could darn well have it.
Lighthouse Willie was the original tenant of the building. All these years later, his presence lingers. Manning the lighthouse may have been Willie's finest hour, built in response to the devastation of the superstorm known as the Yankee Gale.
The Yankee Gale occurred in 1851, and at that time there was only one lighthouse on Prince Edward Island, and it was on the south shore, but all of the fishing was on the north shore. In total, 161 men were lost. And it certainly drove home the need to the government that they had to get more lighthouses there.
So up went the West Point Lighthouse, which continues to serve boaters and fishermen to this day.
I grew up within sight of the West Point Lighthouse. It's an enduring symbol. It's used by the fishermen. It's used by the other mariners. To me, it's a symbol of help, of stability, of people working together, and for our community here, it's become a way of preserving our culture, and it's very special.
Carol looks after her great-grandfather's lighthouse. Mary, meanwhile, tends to her grandmother's garden.
I came up here when I was 5 weeks old. Throughout my childhood, I was up here every summer from sort of mid-June until Labor Day weekend. I'm Mary.
I'm Jim, and this is our retreat.
Mary, tell us, how does your garden grow?
This is my grandmother's geranium. It's called Johnson's Blue Geranium.
These delicate purple blossoms occupy a treasured space in one of the country's most lavish private gardens, jewel in the crown of their summer home, Glenwarren. House and garden are situated in Shanty Bay, on the shore of Ontario's Lake Simcoe. The place dates back a century and is still in the hands of the original family.
Peonies and the lilies on the wall are well over 80 years old.
My grandparents used to summer in Muskoka, and in 1927, my grandfather rented a cottage in Shanty Bay for 2 summers, and he thought it was so good for my mother and my 3 older brothers that he said, look around and find a property we can buy. And she found this, and they bought it.
Her grandfather was J.J. Warren, a railway magnate and venture capitalist. As J.J.'s fortune grew, his wife saw growth potential elsewhere. Annie Edith Parker Warren sowed the seeds that now make Glenwarren so unique.
This is what we call the south garden that overlooks the lake, and these peonies are original to the property. They would have been chosen by my grandmother
and they're looking pretty good for the age of 80.
And this is one of the original iris on the property. So you see there's several colors along here. They're very bright. They have lots of buds on them.
And behind it is an addition from Mary's father. Put in the 50s or early 60s. Yeah. Its common name is snake root, and its Latin name is
Simicifuga.
Mary knows every plant intimately.
This is original.
She has forged a lifelong bond with the garden and its surroundings.
I came up here when I was 5 weeks old, and throughout my childhood I was up here every summer from sort of mid-June until Labor Day weekend.
For Mary and her 4 brothers, the gardens were like a wonderland.
There were 11 arbors on this property. The stone walls were high. The hide and seek on this property was fantastic. We played in the woods, we made forts in the woods, and swimming. We spent enormous time in the lake.
Fun and sun has remained a family tradition. Maintaining that tradition is serious business.
Do you feel that you really are continuing something that was created, and you hope that, of course, it will last forever?
Its survival will depend on the 4th and 5th generations of the family.
Here they are.
Lucky their children and grandchildren are regular visitors.
John, welcome.
Hi, William. Are you awake? It's an anchor point for us as well as our family. We love it in the sense that it has supplied continuity.
Like their grandmother once did, the kids still revel in the glories of the garden.
Well, I think it means a lot to everybody in the family. Our grandson, who when he was 2 years old and he came up and he pointed and he said, "I like Shanty Bay. I like Shanty Bay." And he went round in a circle, 360 degrees, pointing in each direction, saying, "I like Shanty Bay."
The man who pushes trucks.
Young William and his sister Laura are blissfully unaware that they almost never got to experience the joys of Shanty Bay. But their grandmother knows how close they came to losing it all.
We had to rent it. And in order to rent it, we had to do what had not been done for 50 years on the property.
Railway tycoon J.J. Warren built this lush summer getaway in 1929. His descendants have been basking in his largesse ever since. The privilege of access to these gardens lasted 6 decades. But when J.J.'s daughter died in 1988, things got complicated. Surviving grandchildren divided the land into 4. Mary and Jim made the tough decision to buy out the rest of the family. That meant they could stay faithful to the original spirit of the place. It also meant getting perilously low on cash. They needed a lifeline.
We were professors at Queen's University, and we could only be up here a bit in the summertime, and we both liked to garden. So in order to make it work financially for us, we had to rent it. And in order to rent it, we had to do what had not been done for 50 years on the property.
For their bank balance to come up, some of these precious evergreens had to come down.
That cottage was encased in cedar trees, and there was a 10-foot cedar hedge along the water here. So you could only see the far shore. In the spring of '89, we hired our 2 children, and they went to work, and everything had to be done in 2 months. We had all the cedars cut down. It looked very bare. We chose the trees and installed the trees that we wanted along the perimeter, so that out of every room on the property, I have trees that are visible.
The bold new landscaping cleared the way for interior changes.
All the interior walls were removed, and now all had to be repainted while we were living in it. It cemented the 4 of us as an adult family, because that was a huge enterprise to undertake.
The result of their labor is a combination of Cape Cod elegance with a few modern conveniences.
We went to flea markets and picked up things that would, nicer ceiling lights and things like that, and lighter colored fabrics. There's this lightness and in many areas the kind of connection to the garden than there were when my parents had it.
The house has 5 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, each one appointed with old-fashioned clawfoot soaker tubs. The stone in these fireplaces was quarried from the property itself. Some of this furniture dates back to 1929, the year the cottage was built. French doors make the ideal passageway to the back garden. A cottage getaway is always a great thing. If it comes with a nice garden, that's icing on the cake. At Glen Warren, the garden is the cake. And we think that's really sweet.
It's a lot of work, but it's also a lot of enjoyment. Wherever you look, you can see the things you've done, as well as the things that need to be done. But you do get a feeling of being sort of master of your world.
All through the day, the light is changing and catching the flowers and catching the stone walls and catching the trees. I'm always thinking, Jim, look at the light now, Jim. It changes in the back gardens, it changes in the front gardens. It is a constantly in flux and change, and it's lovely.